Joining us now, House of Delegates member in Virginia, Nick Freitas. Nick, good to have you with us, man.
Good to be here, John. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Nick, let's just go right to reality. All right, you look at the results of the election in Virginia on Tuesday. The Republicans getting wiped out. The vote in Fairfax alone, Gillespie losing Fairfax to Ralph Northam by 139,000 votes. As chairman of the Trump campaign, I lost Fairfax by 139,000 votes. So it was identical. Ed Gillespie campaigned as the moderate in order to hold down the Fairfax and other Northern Virginia Democratic wave. He couldn't do it. He got wiped out. Almost 250,000 vote margin for Northam in Northern Virginia. You simply can't make that up. How does you or any other Republican win a statewide race in Virginia?
Well, sure. I mean, I think the first thing that we need to realize is that obviously what happens in Washington, D.C. has a huge effect on Virginia's elections. And we're used to seeing whatever party controls the White House, we're used to seeing the opposite party win the gubernatorial election with I think, one exception since the 70s. That's been the case. What is unprecedented is, again, 15 different delegates losing their seats, all of them had really good records with respect to constituent services and representing their district. I think the big question going forward now within Virginia, and really it's a question that the entire Republican Party faces, is what sort of party are we going to be? And I think we're going in one of two directions. It's either going to be big government republicanism, or we're going to go back to being the party of individual liberty, of private property rights, of believing in equal protection before the law. And if we can go with that message, I think we can win statewide. But again, we have to believe it. And not only that, and this one's huge, John, we promised the American people at the national level that if you gave us the House of Representatives, if you gave us the Senate, if you gave us the presidency, we would get things done. And we spend more time fighting amongst ourselves than we actually do getting things done. And so we have to be effective. Again, stand on principle. It's not about getting something done. It's about getting the right things done. And Republicans need to prove that we're actually capable of governing. And there's been a problem with that at the national level. There's so much infighting within the Senate, within the House. And again, we have to make good on our promises, or else no one is going to trust us, no matter how good the ideas are.
Well, okay, but you really didn't answer my question. I mean, Ed Gillespie campaign, the whole premise of his campaign, not get Trump in, don't meet the president, don't retweet the whole premise of the Phil Cox consultant-driven Gillespie effort was to not get lambasted in Northern Virginia, right? I mean, that was the whole premise of it. Like, if we don't do Trump and we don't have him here and we don't embrace him and we don't talk to him and we blow his people off and we thread the needle, Northern Virginia is not going to annihilate us. Well, they did that. The consultants like Phil Cox drove the campaign, and they got crushed. So how does Nick Freitas go in there and hold those margins down?
Well, again, I don't think it's about – the problem is right now we've got a lot of people assessing this race, and they either want to say it's all about Trump or it had nothing to do with Trump. Again, I don't – my concern is this. We're going to look at the data for this race, and instead of actually analyzing it to determine how do we become more effective statewide, we're going to use it, or different personalities are going to use it as a way to bludgeon their political opponents or try to settle scores within the Republican Party. If we want to do a quick top-down analysis of the numbers, I think what we see is that Ed Gillespie got record turnout with respect to a gubernatorial campaign, but the Democrats turned out in far wider numbers. Okay, why is that? I think some of it is, some of the Republicans didn't show up. It's definitely a backlash against Republicans not being able to get anything done in D.C. I think with respect to Democrats, you had a lot of Democrats that were motivated by a lot of different reasons on why they decided to come out on Election Day. But the way we go forward is, again, it's not, I certainly don't think it's because it's for the Republican Party to abandon our principles and simply become more moderate, because that doesn't work. And we've proven that I don't know how many different times, that it doesn't work when the Republican Party essentially abandons its principles in the hopes that people on the far left are going to come out and vote for us, or at least just, not compare us to racists and, murderers. But the way that you do it is again, you have to actually believe, you actually have to have a message that you believe in. And right now we've seen a lot, and I'm not specifically speaking about the Gillespie campaign, but in the Republican Party in general, has more and more been seen as a cronyist party. We've been seen as a party that doesn't genuinely believe in free markets. We believe in markets as long as they're benefiting certain people.
Right.
We're a party that has some serious problems with respect to criminal justice reform. And when we go back to the liberty-based issues, when we actually show up and we say, guess what, this isn't a question of who controls the government apparatus in order to benefit one side or the other. This is about who goes up there to ensure that government stays within its proper constitutional boundaries. Because when we actually talk about the power of the individual, that's an intoxicating message. People inherently respond to that. But right now, people don't believe it within the Republican Party because, quite frankly, we've had a lot of elected officials that say that when they're campaigning, but they don't actually govern that way. And I do think people have an expectation that if you're really going to believe it, if you're going to talk about it the way Reagan talked about it, or if you're going to talk about it the way other people have talked about it, you've then got to go up there and actually prove that you believe in it. And when you can do that, and when people see both the sincerity and they also see the capability of getting something done and they see the positive results, that's when you win elections. But there's some serious rebuilding that has to be done. And again, I'll go back to this. The people that want to say it's all about Trump or it has nothing to do with Trump, both of them are wrong. The people that want to say that it had everything to do with D.C. or nothing to do with D.C., both of them are wrong. We need to go back and actually take a hard look at all this data. But the last thing we need to do is be ashamed of who we are as Republicans and what our Republican creed of Virginia says. Those are winning issues. Again, I like to tell people, it's not as if the Republican Party got together, picked 6 different principles in Virginia and decided, okay, that's what we believe. We recognize certain truths about reality, certain truths about what's successful and what works economically, socially, and we adopted those as our principles. I think one of the reasons why we have such a toxic environment within politics right now is because both sides have been complicit. That when we sit down and we have the conversation, it's no longer about live and let live. Okay, we disagree. You go live your life, I'll live my life, and let's let the consequences of our actions play out. No. Now we get up from the conversation and we immediately grab a legislator, and we try to impose our will on the other person. So I think we need to go back with the message of, look, government has an important role to play, but it's a limited one. And if you really believe in live and let live, if you really believe in tolerance and coexistence, then you're not going to demand that the government impose your particular solution to a problem on your neighbor.
Right.
And I think that's a message that resonates. I think it's a message that certainly resonates with younger voters that are starting to come up, because we're getting to a point right now where Generation X, millennials, and whatnot, they're going to be the dominant voting demographic. And the good news is this. A lot of millennials, a lot of Gen Xers, they mistrust government power. Now, they're either going to go the Bernie Sanders route where they say, yeah, mistrust government power, but get it all of it's just absurd. Right. Or they're going to go the liberty route where we genuinely believe as a party that the solution to most of our problems is to keep government within those boundaries and then return more power back to individuals.
Nick, I'm going to get to policy in a minute, but I got to get to politics. Right now, today, Corey Stewart, overwhelming favorite to be the nominee, got a campaign, has an organization, has a following, almost beat Gillespie for the nomination. He's very aggressive. You get in, he's going to paint you as establishment. He's going to paint you as basically a Republican Party of Virginia tool of the elected officials, and you're going to have to run into the Corey Stewart chainsaw. Why would you put yourself through that?
Well, first of all, John, if I get into this race, I'm not running against Corey Stewart. I'm running against Tim Kaine. My strategy has never been to get into this race and destroy other Republican candidates. It's been to represent what we believe as a party. And that's not just hyperbole. That's what I really believe. I think there's been far too much infighting within the Republican Party, and some of that is healthy. We have to have the discussion about what we really believe. But then when it bleeds over and it becomes just an excuse, again, to settle scores among people and settle personal vendettas, that's a problem. So, look, I'm not getting in this with the concern of what Corey's going to say or what Corey's going to do. I'm going to let Corey run his race, and I'm going to run mine if I decide to run. But again, trying to paint me as establishment is about as ridiculous as you possibly could go. I've been in the General Assembly 2 years. Take a look at my voting record. Take a look at my stances. Take a look at my floor speeches. Take a look at what I've done within the grassroots and where I came from. So I think the real story here with respect to the candidates, if it was Corey, EW, and myself in the race, you really don't have what you could typecast as a establishment candidate. Those would all be considered, candidates from outside the establishment circle. And then then we make a decision based off of policy, based off of experience, and based off of who's most suited to represent Virginia in the United States Senate. But again, my goal is not to get in here and try to tear down Corey or tear down EW. I want to go there and talk about what I believe in. Mm-hmm. And if I run, that's what I'll do.
Okay, so Nick Freitas, let's get to some of the issues. Let's start with the tax plan that's on the table right now. It's in the Senate. If you were there, it is what it is. I mean, you're going to be faced with a binary choice, voted in or voted out. As from what you've seen right now, if you were in the Senate, would you back it or not?
No, I'd back it. And again, it's like you said, right? It's a binary vote at this point.
Right now it is, yes.
Could it be better? Yeah, could it be better? Sure. Do we need to cut spending at the same time? Absolutely. But any time that we can take money out of the hands of politicians and put it back into the hands of people that earned it, that's a worthwhile goal.
Nick, you're a veteran, right? You served your country admirably. We've had a debate over reauthorizing the AUMF, or the authorization for a military force specifically for Afghanistan. I, for one, don't think we should be there. Everybody knows what my position is on all these wars. I'm not in favor. I was opposed to all of them, so I'll put that disclaimer out right there. Why is it not okay to just have a debate on a new AUMF? If you were in the Senate, would you be in favor of debating a new AUMF on the floor in the well as to what the hell our mission is in Afghanistan or not?
If I was in the Senate, I'd be in favor of having a debate on why are we using AUMFs in the first place. We have different constitutional mechanisms for using violent force. One of them is a declaration of war. The other is a letter of marque and reprisal. And I would like us to see constitutional methods in order to go to war, in order to put men and women in harm's way, because I've been in harm's way. I went to combat twice in Iraq. And I can tell you, I have absolutely no qualms about going overseas and fighting for my country. But I think politicians should at least be, somewhat as courageous politically as our men and women in uniform are militarily. And right now, what I see is a bunch of legislators that essentially want to, when the war's going well or when something's going well, they want to sit there and beat their chest and say, "Yep, we're a part of it." And as soon as it gets messy, as all wars do, then they want to say, "Oh, well, it's the president's war." So I think not only do I think we need to debate on that, I think we need to go back and take an honest look at how we authorize the use of military force, because we have proper constitutional mechanisms for doing so. It doesn't always require a declaration of war to constitutionally deploy forces. But right now, I'm a little bit sickened by the fact that we expect men and women to go overseas and fight and die to protect this country, to defend our way of life, to protect the Constitution. But politicians want to sit there and equivocate with respect to how we deploy them. So, no, I would absolutely be in favor of debating that and getting us back on a constitutional footing when it comes to deploying forces overseas.
I got to tell you, Nick, that's one of the most compelling, convincing answers to that question that I've heard since this whole thing started. That's solid. Thanks for answering that. Let's get to Judge. And look, nobody has more authority on it than you, obviously, being in harm's way a number of times. Let's get to Judge Roy Moore. If he wins in Alabama, look, I don't know whether he did these things or not, but I have confidence in the voters. Even when I'm not happy with the outcome, we do have a system of representative Republican government. And so if you vote somebody in, they get in, and if not, and it is what it is. If you're in the U.S. Senate and Moore gets elected, would you vote, as Cory Gardner said, to expel him?
That I don't know, and I'll tell you why. Is because I'm sensitive to accusations from two perspectives. I'm sensitive to accusations because obviously what Roy Moore is accused of is incredibly significant. Mm-hmm. And if he is guilty of it, then forget serving in the Senate, he should be in jail. Mm-hmm. If he's not guilty of it, well, then people have essentially tried to destroy him politically. For whatever reason they've decided, they've tried to destroy a man personally. Mm-hmm. And so for me, this really comes down to a question of, is this man guilty of what he's been accused of? And I think that's in part a question for courts, and yes, in part with respect to the electorate, a question of the court of public opinion. So again, I have faith in voters to do the right thing. If he gets there and he hasn't been convicted of anything, then I have a hard time saying that we should expel him. But if the evidence comes out and says that, no, he did this, and it's something where a statute of limitations prevents him from being criminally convicted, then yeah, it would absolutely be appropriate to vote to expel him. But I have a real problem with passing judgment on these things before all of the evidence is out and before everybody's had a chance to either have their day in court or have their say with respect to the people that were involved. So, again, if he's guilty, I'm not going to equivocate. And quite frankly, I found it a little bit disturbing that there's so many people on the right that are instantly willing to not simply say, hey, let him have his day in court, or let him have his day in the court of public opinion with respect to the election, but have somehow tried to excuse the behavior. All right, there's no excuse for the behavior, period. So if he's guilty, then the full weight of the law and the full weight of public opinion needs to come out against him, regardless of the political party he's affiliated with.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, this is equal protection before the law. If he gets in there, and again, he's exonerated, we shouldn't be. This is part of the problem too. When politicians rush out whenever there's something going on to immediately try to get name recognition for, look at me, I'm a champion of this or I'm a champion of that. What you should be a champion for is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So I want the truth to come out about Roy Moore. When we have a better understanding of what that actually is, then we can make an informed decision as to what to do with him. But I'm adamant about let the truth come out before we start making loud pronouncements about what we would or would not do if he ends up being elected.
What a refreshing view from Nick Freitas. He says facts matter. Oh, boy, I haven't heard that in a while, Nick, in Washington in the swamp. I've only got 20 seconds. When are you going to make a decision?
I'm going to go ahead and copy EW. We'll make a decision here within the next 3 weeks.
All right, within the next 3 weeks.
At the advance.
All right, in the advance, hopefully we'll have everybody in by then. We're out of time. I want to thank Nick Freitas for being with us. House of Delegates member in Richmond, and 3 weeks away from making the decision whether he's going to run for U.S. Senate. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network.